Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most absolutely incredible historical shifts of the modern era. We're going to trace the wild 80-year transformation of these scattered, relatively small British settlements along the North American coast into a completely brand new unified nation, the United States of America. It's a story packed with radical ideas, bitter protests, and a really grueling war. But before we really get going, I want you to just pause and consider this. How exactly did a ragtag group of loosely connected colonies manage to absolutely crush a massive global empire, and in the process, literally birth modern constitutional democracy? I mean, it's wild when you think about it. It wasn't an overnight rebellion. It was a slow, intense burn of changing mindsets. All right, so here is our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. Ideas that sparked change. 2. Rising tensions and protests. 3. The breaking point. 4. Declaring true independence. 5. Winning the Revolutionary War. And 6. A blueprint for democracy. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. Ideas that sparked change.
So, think back to the early to mid-1700s. You've got two huge movements sweeping through the colonies. First up is the Great Awakening. This was a massive religious revival where preachers started using plain, everyday language, really encouraging a direct personal connection to God. And this is a game changer because it taught people to question traditional religious leaders who maybe felt a bit, cold or distant. And once ordinary folks realized they had the right, even the duty, to question their church authorities, it was a pretty natural jump to start using the new, buzzy European ideas of the Enlightenment to question their political leaders as well. Enter John Locke. This English philosopher's ideas were quite literally the fuel for this entire new mindset. Colonists are sitting around in taverns, reading newspapers, and absorbing Locke's arguments. He said that we are all born with natural rights: life, liberty, property, meaning governments don't just exist because of some divine right. They exist solely to protect these natural rights. And they only get their power from the consent of the governed. So if a government stops doing its job, the people have every right to totally replace it. That single idea was the foundational spark for the colony's sudden thirst for liberty. Section 2. Rising tensions and protests. Okay, so the events following 1763 created this rapid, intense pressure cooker situation. It's a classic tit-for-tat escalation. Britain had just fought the French and Indian War, right? They won a ton of land in North America, but they also racked up massive, massive debt. To manage the land, they issued the Proclamation of 1763, which basically told colonists they couldn't settle out west, totally angering them. Then, to pay off that mountain of debt, Parliament starts slapping on taxes: the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts. The colonial resistance to this grew fiercely. I mean, it leads to the deadly Boston Massacre in 1770, and of course, the famous Boston Tea Party in 1773. Britain then retaliates hard with the Intolerable Acts, literally closing Boston Harbor and stripping away their self-government. And really, it all boiled down to one iconic phrase you've definitely heard: no taxation without representation. See, the colonists were totally used to electing their own representatives to local assemblies. Those local guys passed the laws and controlled the taxes. So the point the colonists were making was crystal clear. Only their elected assemblies had the right to tax them, not some distant parliament over in London where they had absolutely zero voice. So Britain tries to crack down and punish Massachusetts with the Intolerable Acts, but it totally backfires. Colonists everywhere saw this as a massive threat to their own liberties. Facing this kind of heavy-handed control, 12 of the 13 distinct colonies actually teamed up in 1774 at the First Continental Congress. They start coordinating boycotts, prepping local militias. British policies had basically achieved the impossible. They made 13 stubborn, independent-minded colonies more united than ever before. Section 3. The breaking point. April 1775. The talk stops and the shooting starts. British troops march out of Boston to seize colonial weapons and arrest their leaders. But the local Minutemen, these are militias ready to fight literally at a minute's notice, they were waiting. When they clashed at Lexington and Concord, the physical war officially kicked off. Almost immediately, the Second Continental Congress steps up as a makeshift national government and puts a guy named George Washington in charge of the brand new Continental Army. Now, it's wild to think about, but during those early chaotic days of the war, a lot of folks actually still wanted to make peace with the king. They sent the Olive Branch petition, basically begging King George III for a peaceful fix. But the king, he flatly rejects it and declares them an open rebellion. Enter Thomas Paine.
His 1776 pamphlet, Common Sense, was an absolute blockbuster. He used clear, punchy language to argue that it made zero sense for a tiny, distant island to rule a massive continent. He basically convinced everyday, ordinary colonists that completely ditching the monarchy to form a republic wasn't just a good idea, it was the only logical path forward.
Section 4. Declaring true independence.
So King George says no to peace. The result? July 4th, 1776. The Continental Congress officially approves a statement explaining exactly why they're breaking away. Drafted mostly by Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence took all those Enlightenment ideas about natural rights and turned them into a formal declaration of rebellion. It famously proclaimed that all people are created equal with unalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Rights that absolutely cannot be taken away by any king.
If you actually break down the structure of the Declaration, it's a brilliant, point-by-point legal and moral argument. Jefferson essentially took Locke's broad philosophical principles and laid them right next to a very specific laundry list of the king's broken promises. Natural rights violated by taxes without consent, consent of the governed violated by dissolving local legislatures. So the conclusion was obvious. Because the king kept armies around in peacetime and trampled on basic rights, the colonists were simply exercising their ultimate right to alter and abolish a broken government.
Section 5. Winning the Revolutionary War. Of course, declaring independence is one thing. Actually surviving a war with a global superpower is a whole different beast. The war was brutal. The Continental Army faced just unimaginable hardships: freezing weather, lack of food, zero supplies, especially during that infamous winter at Valley Forge. But they held on. The real turning point hits in 1777 at Saratoga, New York. The Americans won a massive battle there, which was crucial because it proved to France, hey, we can actually win this thing. France jumps in as an ally, bringing desperately needed money and military power, and that French support is exactly what made the final victory possible. By 1781, American and French troops completely trapped the British Army at Yorktown, forcing them to surrender.
Fast forward 2 years to 1783, and it's officially over. With the Treaty of Paris, Britain has to formally recognize its former colonies as an entirely separate, sovereign nation. And they didn't just get independence, they secured massive new territorial boundaries stretching from the Atlantic all the way to the Mississippi River. The whole map changed.
Section 6. A blueprint for democracy.
Now they have a country, but they need a government. When they sat down to write their state constitutions and eventually the US Constitution, they didn't just pull ideas out of thin air. They took a very specific blend of political traditions. They took civic republicanism, this idea that citizens should care about the common good. They mixed that with classical liberalism, which is all about protecting individual rights and keeping government small. They even kept the best parts of their English heritage, like having elected representatives and restricting the leader's power. By mixing all of this together, they built a totally new framework, a constitutional democracy relying on written rules and strict checks and balances, making sure no single person could ever seize total control again.
And here's the really incredible part. This didn't just stay in America. The ideas spread like wildfire. French soldiers who fought with the Americans went home and eventually challenged their own king. It proved to the entire world, to reformers in Europe and Latin America, that ordinary folks could absolutely overthrow a massive monarchy and build a government based on equality and the consent of the governed. It was a real game changer.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on regarding the historical roots of our lives right now. The world we live in today was forged by these exact concepts. So, which of these revolutionary ideas? Is it the consent of the governed, or maybe the system of checks and balances? Which one do you think does the most heavy lifting to protect the democratic systems we rely on today? Think about that for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.